Cold billionaire chose his mistress over his pregnant wife. The tragic consequence he will never forget. A storm raged the night billionaire Damian Mercer made the most fateful choice of his life. He was torn between two women, his devoted pregnant wife Evelyn and his alluring, cunning mistress Sasha. With a heart hardened by ambition and a mind clouded by temptation, Damian chose to cast aside the woman who once meant everything to him. Little did he know, his decision would spark a chain of events far more devastating than any corporate takeover or multi-billion-dollar deal he had ever faced. This is the tragic saga of a man whose boundless wealth could not save him from the ruin of an unforgivable betrayal. Damian Mercer was, by all external measures, living the perfect life. Son of the late magnate Richard Mercer, Damian inherited Mercer Global, an international conglomerate dealing in everything from steel manufacturing to luxury resorts. The Mercer name was legendary in the corridors of Wall Street, whispered with reverence in the VIP lounges of Monaco and Dubai. If there was a new skyscraper sprouting on the horizon, chances were good that Mercer Global had a stake in it. At 38, Damian had it all: youth, intelligence, good looks, and a net worth easily flirting with the billions. On the surface, his days were a parade of private jets, brand new acquisitions, and philanthropic galas. Lavish boardrooms bore witness to his sharp intellect and ruthless negotiation skills, leaving older CEOs quaking in their polished shoes. But behind that polished exterior, a hollow loneliness had begun to grow. Damian's nights were often consumed by the kind of restlessness that not even the world's costliest whiskey could quell. Despite a sprawling penthouse on Fifth Avenue, a mansion in Connecticut, and a private island off the coast of Greece, something intangible gnawed at him, and that void could only be filled when he met and fell headlong into obsession with Sasha Lennox. Before the chaos Sasha brought into his life, there was Evelyn Carson Mercer, his wife for the past 4 years. They had met at a charity event in London. Evelyn was volunteering as a translator for an international refugee organization, a passionate advocate who championed human rights. Damian, who was overseeing Mercer Global's philanthropic arm at that time, had been drawn to her warmth and her unwavering sense of justice. Evelyn was the complete opposite of the women Damian usually encountered. She was neither drawn by his wealth nor mesmerized by his power. Her sincerity had disarmed him. She had insisted on paying her share at restaurants, never asked him for extravagant gifts, and had no desire to trade her moral convictions for the privileges of the billionaire's world. To Damian, she was a breath of fresh air in the stifling world of social climbers and sycophants. For 3 joyous years they lived in a bubble of love, forging a bond that seemed impervious to the storms outside. Evelyn became more than just a wife. She was a moral compass and a partner, the woman who anchored him to reality. That anchor, however, would start to slip from his grasp once Sasha Lennox stepped into the picture. As the hush settled over Manhattan that fateful evening, Damian felt torn in two. He was about to embark on a journey he had never foreseen, one that involved secrets, betrayal, and heartbreak. Through the tinted windows of his limousine, the city lights beckoned him with promises of excitement and danger. Damian, for all his wealth and success, was just another soul about to be devoured by his own reckless desires. When Damian married Evelyn, many in New York's elite circles were surprised. They expected him to choose a glamorous socialite, or perhaps a foreign princess, someone who could match the dazzle of his fortune. But Evelyn was a quiet soul, whose radiance came from compassion, not couture. Her modest upbringing in Greenfield, a small Massachusetts town, had shaped her humility. Raised by 2 public school teachers, Robert and Mary Carson, Evelyn grew up valuing kindness, fairness, and hard work above all else. In the early years of her marriage, Evelyn did find the Mercer lifestyle intimidating. One moment, she was living in a modest studio apartment in Boston, working at a non-profit law clinic. The next, she was whisked off to star-studded soirees where her gown alone cost more than her entire year's rent. She'd be lying if she said the transition was smooth. Yet, instead of succumbing to the superficial trappings of wealth, Evelyn strove to use her new position for good. Her philanthropic efforts became the perfect complement to Damien's empire, melding corporate clout with heartfelt charity. Over time, her calm demeanor and sincere approach endeared her to many, including Damien's colleagues like Alexander Miller, his longtime friend and Mercer Global's CFO, and to longtime family friends such as Janet Whitmore, who had been Richard Mercer's trusted assistant for decades. They recognized in Evelyn a stabilizing force, a hint of altruism in a world all too often dominated by cold ambition. Evelyn's day would start early, even in the hush of the Mercer penthouse. By 6 in the morning, she'd be in the kitchen, preparing fresh fruit smoothies and scanning the latest human rights reports. She volunteered her time at local shelters, organized legal aid workshops for immigrants, and kept her father-in-law's philanthropic foundation running with unshakable dedication. None of these efforts were for her own glory. She refused to appear in tabloids or magazines whenever possible. She wanted to do good without craving attention. Damien admired his wife for these qualities. He loved her for them. Initially, she reminded him of a side of life he had overlooked, the simplicity of real connection, the importance of empathy. And yet, as years passed, that same virtue became a reminder of everything in him that wasn't pure. The more Evelyn shone as an altruistic spirit, the more Damien felt acutely aware of his cutthroat tactics in the boardroom. The guilt made him restless, almost as though he wanted to rebel against the purity that Evelyn embodied. When Evelyn announced her pregnancy after 3 years of marriage, Damien was overjoyed, at least on the surface. Everyone clapped him on the back, raising toasts to the future heir of Mercer Global. Evelyn's face glowed with maternal bliss, but deep in Damien's heart, swirling under the polished exterior, was a maelstrom of doubts. Would fatherhood confine him? Was he truly ready to sacrifice the freedom and thrill that came with his lifestyle of private jets and late-night parties? Little did he know that these unspoken fears would soon push him to make decisions that would shatter his carefully constructed life and break the heart of the one person who truly loved him for who he was. Sasha Lennox first arrived in New York with nothing but a small suitcase and an oversized ambition. She once confided in a friend, Clara Morales, a struggling actress also from Sasha's hometown, that she planned to become the most successful woman in Manhattan. "If I can't be the next big actress," she had declared, "then I'll do whatever it takes to be on top." Sasha's beginnings were humble, the daughter of a bartender and a seamstress in rural Iowa, but she possessed an uncanny magnetism. People gravitated toward her, men and women alike, partly because of her sultry confidence and partly because she knew exactly what to say to make others feel important. She had an innate knack for reading people's desires, and she never hesitated to exploit that skill. She first saw Damien Mercer at a gala hosted by the Mercer Foundation to fund underprivileged students. Sasha had snagged an invitation through a casual acquaintance, an older investment banker smitten with her charm. She wore a shimmering black gown that hugged her figure. Her every step on the polished marble floor of the Waldorf Astoria was perfectly timed to turn heads. Damien, playing the charismatic host, floated from one cluster of wealthy patrons to another. The moment Sasha locked eyes with him, she knew. He was the prize she'd been seeking. Throughout that evening, Sasha made sure to stay within Damien's peripheral vision, laughing, chatting, making her presence impossible to ignore without even speaking a word to him. She studied him in fleeting glimpses. The slight frown line between his brows, the squared shoulders, the confident tilt of his chin. When she finally caught his attention, Sasha offered him a gentle smile, one that brimmed with intrigue. In that second, something flickered in Damien's gaze. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe it was the first spark of dangerous attraction. Their first conversation was brief, a simple exchange of pleasantries. Sasha introduced herself as a rising entrepreneur in the fashion industry, leaving out the specifics of her near-failing boutique in Brooklyn. He politely gave her his card, the golden Mercer Global logo glinting under the chandeliers, and suggested she contact his office if she was looking for new business connections. That was all the encouragement Sasha needed. Over the next few weeks, Sasha orchestrated coincidental run-ins at exclusive lounges and art galleries. She feigned surprise every time they met, though she had meticulously planned her presence. Slowly, she built a connection, letting Damien know bits of her life, her aspirations, her struggles. She never mentioned money directly. She knew men like Damien had heard every sob story from every gold digger. Instead, she appealed to his sense of adventure. She was witty, fascinating, and she listened like he was the only man on earth. Damien began to crave these encounters. With Evelyn busy overseeing the Foundation's new outreach programs and her pregnancy appointments, Sasha provided a thrilling escape. That spark he felt at the gala was blossoming into a flame. Under the dazzling skyline of Manhattan, unspoken desires turned into secret rendezvous that would cast a dark, ominous shadow over the life he had built with Evelyn. Damien prided himself on being a rational man, a strategic thinker who could outmaneuver his competitors. Yet, his affair with Sasha violated every principle he believed defined him. Suddenly, he was sneaking out of the office at odd hours, cancelling important meetings, and even ignoring calls from Evelyn, all in pursuit of the next fleeting thrill with his new paramour. The transition from flirtatious banter to full-blown affair happened in a whirlwind. Sasha was a masterful conductor of seduction. She peppered him with admiration, professed awe at his business acumen, and giggled at his every joke. She wore the perfume he complimented her on, made reservations at exclusive restaurants he casually mentioned, and always left him wanting more. But it wasn't just lust. Sasha knew how to make him feel alive. She tapped into the rebellious side of Damien that he had long suppressed. With Sasha, he could temporarily forget about fatherhood, marital responsibilities, and the philanthropic obligations that Evelyn cherished. If Evelyn made him contemplate the morality of his every action, Sasha made him feel free from consequence. Alexander Miller, the CFO and Damien's longtime friend, began to notice the shift in Damien's behavior. Late-night finance meetings turned into rescheduled calls with vague excuses. Damien's focus on company expansions seemed to wane. Despite being a loyal friend, Alexander confronted Damien in the executive suite one evening after a particularly important investor meeting that Damien had bailed on. "You're slipping," Alexander said, loosening his tie as he closed the door to the office. "I covered for you this time, but the board is starting to whisper. And Evelyn has been calling me, worried out of her mind." "What's going on?" Damien stiffened, a rush of guilt crossing his features. "I'm under a lot of pressure. You know how it is," he replied, trying to sound nonchalant. Alexander wasn't convinced. "Damien, you can't just ignore your responsibilities. And Evelyn, she's pregnant, man. Don't you think she deserves to know whatever is dragging you away from her?" Damien averted his gaze, silently cursing himself for letting things slip so obviously. But instead of owning up, he doubled down on secrecy. "I'm handling it," he said coolly, his voice edging with annoyance. "Let it go." Yet guilt began to gnaw at him in private. Late at night, when he was alone with his thoughts in that sprawling penthouse suite, Evelyn usually asleep after hours of philanthropic planning, he caught glimpses of himself in the full-length mirrors and felt shame. He was compromising his ethics and risking the love of a woman who had never asked anything of him except honesty. Meanwhile, Sasha too had her own circle of confidants. She boasted about the gifts Damien showered upon her, jewelry, a chic apartment in Soho, and soon a new sports car. Yet she was careful not to scare him off with demands. She understood the game. Patience was her virtue, for she was playing the long con. She wanted more than a fling. She wanted the billionaire himself. Unbeknownst to both, these seeds of betrayal would soon sprout into a monstrous crisis that neither love nor money could contain. Evelyn was 2 months pregnant when she first suspected Damien's unfaithfulness. A subtle hint, a faint perfume on his collar that wasn't hers, an unusually hostile tone over dinner when she asked why he was coming home so late. The distance in his eyes every time she mentioned their future child. Each small clue stirred an uneasy feeling in her heart. In her early weeks of pregnancy, Evelyn had felt radiant and optimistic. She pictured a cozy family, the echo of children's laughter in the Mercer penthouse, a sense of completeness that wealth alone could never bring. But as her suspicions grew, her joy was replaced by anxiety. She was no stranger to heartbreak. She had seen it in the eyes of the refugees she worked with, in women who had lost everything, including the loyalty of loved ones. Yet she never imagined she'd face such betrayal in her own marriage. Unable to bear the tension in her home, she confided in her old friend and personal attorney, Dr. Rosalie Patel. Dr. Patel had a knack for reading emotional subtext, and she confirmed Evelyn's fears gently. "Trust your instincts," she said, patting Evelyn's hand during a lunch break at the foundation. "But whatever you do, don't jump to conclusions without evidence. You owe that much to yourself and your child." Determined to find answers, Evelyn tried to confront Damien one evening when he returned past midnight, reeking of expensive liquor and faint traces of another woman's perfume. She mustered her courage, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Damien, I need to talk to you. This can't go on." He turned to face her, his eyes carrying a flicker of guilt quickly replaced by defensiveness. "What do you mean? I've been working. Meetings run late." "Not this late," she responded, her voice cracking. "And not with that smell on your shirt." Silence. The tension in the living room was thick. Damien's heart hammered as a rush of panic flooded him. He offered a half-hearted denial. "You're imagining things. I don't know what you're talking about." Tears brimmed in Evelyn's eyes. "Damien, please, I'm pregnant. We used to share everything. Now I feel like you're a stranger. What's happening to us?" For a moment, Damien almost confessed. The guilt was palpable, and part of him yearned to fall at her feet and beg for forgiveness. But fear and pride won out. "I'm just under a lot of stress," he muttered tersely. "I'm sorry if I've been distant." Evelyn longed to believe him, but a nagging voice in her heart insisted otherwise. She remembered Dr. Patel's words, "Gather proof." Perhaps she would. But for now, she was too emotional, too exhausted. She would let him see her pain, silently pleading for the man she married to come back to her. Damien, feeling her anguish, slipped away to the bedroom. Lying beside her, the great expanse of the king-sized bed separating them like a yawning chasm, he wondered how he had drifted so far. Little did he know, their world was about to crumble more completely than either of them could ever anticipate. While Evelyn grappled with suspicions and maternal anxieties, Sasha Lennox was plotting her next moves, step by calculated step. The lavish gifts were nice, but they weren't the endgame. She wanted influence. She wanted Damien to see her as indispensable, to rely on her not merely for pleasure, but for counsel and companionship. One afternoon, Sasha decided to show up unannounced at Damien's office in the Mercer Global Tower. She wore an elegant navy blue pantsuit, her hair pinned back in a sleek chignon. Heads turned as she sauntered past reception, each click of her heels sending a message. She belonged here. Alexander Miller happened to be in the lobby and saw her. He recognized her from a couple of social events. His eyes narrowed. He approached with cautious politeness. "Miss Lennox, I believe. May I help you?" Sasha smiled, exuding poise. "Oh, I'm just here to see Damien. It's urgent business, about an upcoming fashion collaboration we discussed." Alexander's suspicions soared. He knew of no such collaboration. With forced courtesy, he asked her to wait and phoned Damien's private line. A minute later, a curt acknowledgement from Damien confirmed that she was expected. Sasha shot Alexander a triumphant smile, as if to say, "I'm closer to him than you think." Inside Damien's office, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, the city shimmering under the midday sun. Sasha placed a slim folder on the glass desk. "I've been working on a proposal," she said, voice laden with confidence. "I know Mercer Global has some interest in lifestyle brands. Maybe we can partner with emerging designers like me." Damien studied her with a mix of skepticism and admiration. He leaned back in his leather chair. "And what makes you think Mercer Global would invest in small-scale fashion lines?" She arched an eyebrow. "Because these aren't just any fashion lines," she replied, flipping open the folder to reveal mood boards and strategic outlines. "Streetwear with high-end aesthetics. Luxury meets accessible style. It's a hot market, especially with social media influencers. Imagine if Mercer Global invests early and we corner the market." He thumbed through the papers. Sasha's business plan was surprisingly detailed. She spoke about supply chains, influencer marketing, e-commerce expansions. It was clear she'd done her research. Damien was impressed, yet he couldn't dismiss the underlying tension. She was more than just a lover. She was a cunning player, but he was also seduced by the idea of forging a new frontier in the Mercer empire, one that catered to a younger, trendier demographic. Part of him even admired Sasha's ambition, though he was wary. After all, how often had he himself used cunning to climb the corporate ladder? They discussed finances, branding, potential collaborations, and by the end of it, Damien found himself seriously contemplating a small-scale investment. Sasha beamed at him with gratitude, crossing around the desk to place a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered, leaning in. He inhaled her perfume, smoke and roses, exotic and dangerous. For a brief moment, the lines between business and passion blurred completely. Yet as Sasha left his office with renewed confidence, she knew she was one step closer to embedding herself deeper into Damien's life. It was no longer just about seduction. It was about building a future, her future, on the ruin of his current one. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn's world became an emotional roller coaster. She tried to focus on her pregnancy, attending prenatal checkups with Dr. Charlotte Green, a renowned obstetrician recommended by the Mercer family. Yet every time she felt the baby's fluttering kicks, she was reminded of the precarious state of her marriage. Dreams of a blissful family life were overshadowed by Damien's mounting absences. Unable to silence the voice in her head that warned her of betrayal, Evelyn took an uncharacteristic step. She hired a private investigator. She confided her plan only to Dr. Rosalie Patel, who supported her, albeit reluctantly. Evelyn felt guilty, intrusive, and even paranoid. Yet she needed incontrovertible truth to confront Damien, to either break through his denials or confirm her worst fears. The private investigator, David Hawkins, was a discreet professional. Former law enforcement, he rarely asked personal questions. He only required logistic details: Damien's usual schedule, the type of car he drove, addresses of potential suspects. Evelyn provided them with trembling hands, apologizing even as she handed over the information. David reassured her, "You're not doing anything wrong. You just want the truth." For 10 harrowing days, Evelyn waited, her heart pounding each time David called. Whenever Damien mentioned late meetings or urgent business trips, her anxiety soared. Nights became sleepless, her body exhausted from pregnancy, her mind burdened by dread. She caught glimpses of the man she loved, moments when he'd smile at her with genuine warmth or place a gentle hand on her belly. But these moments were fleeting. It was as though she was living with two different versions of Damien, one she cherished and one who lied to her face. Finally, on the 11th day, David arranged a meeting at a quiet cafe in Midtown. Evelyn arrived early, wearing a simple grey coat that felt heavier than ever. David joined her shortly after, a somber expression etched across his features. "I have some findings," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. Evelyn's hands trembled as she opened it. Photographs spilled out, each capturing Damien in compromising positions with another woman, Sasha Lennox. They were holding hands outside a posh restaurant on the Upper East Side, entering a luxury apartment building in Soho late at night and embracing in front of a private limo. The proof was undeniable. Evelyn felt the world tilt around her. Tears pooled in her eyes, and she swallowed hard to keep from breaking down in public. David offered a sympathetic nod. "I'm sorry. There's more. Finances, real estate transactions, but it's all in the report. You can use it however you see fit." She wanted to scream, to smash the pictures, to weep for what was lost. Instead, she forced herself to remain composed, at least until she left the cafe. Heart-pounding, she thanked David and hurried out into the cold Manhattan air. Her mind swirled with questions. How could Damien do this while she was pregnant with his child? What did she do wrong? Was there any hope left to salvage her marriage? Her hands unconsciously pressed against her belly. For the sake of her unborn baby, she vowed she would not be silent. Damien would have to face what he had done, or risk losing her forever. Later that night, Evelyn waited in the living room, the envelope of photos tucked neatly under a lamp on the side table. Time crawled by as she listened for the elevator's ding. At long last, shortly after midnight, Damien stepped into the penthouse. He was tired but alert enough to sense the tension in the air. Evelyn's posture, stiff and resolute, was not the usual gentle figure he was accustomed to. "Evelyn," he began, removing his coat. "You're still up? Is everything okay?" She rose slowly, exhaling a shaky breath. "We need to talk," she said, her voice caught between heartbreak and anger. She gestured to the sofa, and he reluctantly sat down. The ambiance was tense, suffocating. Evelyn reached for the envelope. Pulling out the photographs, she laid them on the coffee table in front of him. With trembling hands, she flipped through the images. Damien's eyes widened, horror spreading across his face. "I know," Evelyn said softly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know about Sasha Lennox. I know about your affair." Damien stared, speechless, as if time had frozen. This was the moment he had feared, yet he had deluded himself into thinking he could hide his indiscretions indefinitely. The air crackled with the weight of truth finally exposed. "How?" he began, struggling to find the words. "Evelyn, You lied to me," she cut him off, her tone trembling yet forceful. "You were going out late at night, making excuses. And you knew I was pregnant. How could you do this to us, to your child?" Damien tried to speak, but no words came. Guilt and shame stained his features. He wanted to deny it, to say it meant nothing, to plead for forgiveness. Yet he couldn't summon any coherent justification. "You told me to trust you," Evelyn continued, voice cracking as tears spilled down her cheeks. "You promised to love me, stand by me. Was all of that a lie, Damien? Did our marriage mean nothing to you?" He finally managed a shaky sentence. "No, Evelyn, I do care about you, I swear. It's just, I lost myself. Things got complicated." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away as though his touch might burn her. "Complicated," she echoed, seething with hurt. "You think betrayal is just complicated? I'm carrying your child, and you're out there living a double life." For a moment, the magnitude of his own actions hit him full force. He saw the woman he once adored, tears streaming down a face that had always smiled lovingly at him. But he also thought of Sasha, her seductive promises, her unwavering admiration that made him feel invincible. Torn and desperate, he realized there was no easy path forward. "I'm sorry," he repeated, voice hollow. "I never wanted to hurt you." Evelyn's tears refused to stop. She pressed a hand protectively over her belly, a silent vow to protect her unborn child from any further pain. "You already did," she whispered. "What happens now depends on you, Damien. Choose who you want to be and who you want in your life." In the silence that followed, Damien could only stare at the broken woman before him and the incriminating photographs that testified to his unforgivable betrayal. Damien's world felt like it was imploding. In the days following the confrontation, he locked himself in his office and avoided both Evelyn and Sasha. He was consumed by guilt, yet also haunted by the allure that Sasha represented. His father's mantra echoed in his mind, A real man faces his responsibilities, but had he forgotten that lesson entirely? Evelyn, heartbroken, gave him space. She spent her time at prenatal appointments, seeking solace in the gentle hum of medical equipment that reassured her the baby was healthy. Every now and then she would pray for Damien's redemption, that he might see reason, repent, and recommit to their marriage. Meanwhile, Sasha sensed Damien's turmoil. She knew the confrontation had occurred. Damien had cut off all personal communication, responding only in short, business-like texts about their prospective fashion collaboration. She refused to let everything slip away, so she took matters into her own hands. One evening, Sasha ambushed Damien at his office, breezing past Alexander Miller with fierce determination. In the privacy of Damien's sleek corner suite, she delivered an emotional appeal. "You can't just shut me out," she insisted, eyes brimming with tears he wasn't sure were real or staged. "I've given you so much of myself, Damien. Don't tell me it was all for nothing." His response was cold. "I made a mistake, Sasha. I have a wife, a child on the way. I need to fix what I've broken." She stepped closer, her voice trembling with carefully measured vulnerability. "I love you, Damien. I can give you what you really need: passion, excitement, a future full of possibilities. Don't you see? With me, you don't have to hide who you really are. You're free to be ambitious, to live on your own terms." His resolve wavered. Sasha's presence was a potent drug, a reminder of a life unburdened by moral accountability. Even though part of him knew he was tumbling into an abyss, he couldn't resist the pull. That night, he found himself cradling a glass of whiskey, wrestling with indecision. Eventually, in a moment of recklessness and desperation, he made the choice that would define the rest of his life. He declared his intention to separate from Evelyn. He told himself it was for the best, that his marriage was already broken, that Sasha was the one who truly understood him. But deep down, he knew he was running away from responsibility and into the arms of temptation. When he told Evelyn, her world shattered. She had clung to hope, believing that their vows and the child she carried would prevail, but his words fell like stones. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I'm moving out." Betrayal stained every syllable. She nodded numbly, her body trembling with shock. Then, placing a protective hand over her belly, she spoke in a voice that was heartbreakingly calm. "If that's your decision, then go. But you will regret this, Damien. One day, you'll realize what you've done to me, and to our baby." And with that, Damien Mercer, one of the wealthiest men in America, chose to walk away from the woman who had given him unconditional love, carrying his unborn child. With Damien's public separation from Evelyn, tabloids were quick to speculate. Gossip columns in Page 6 and whispers among high society fixated on the reasons behind the fallout. Rumors of a mistress, financial rifts, or even corporate sabotage. For the first time, the Mercer name was dragged through sensational headlines, and it left the board of Mercer Global in a nervous state. Still, Damien proceeded with the life he'd chosen. He relocated to a ritzy penthouse on the Upper East Side, funded by a newly created shell company so his accountants wouldn't raise eyebrows about personal expenditures. Sasha moved in shortly afterward, and for a brief period, Damien felt the rush of living exactly as he pleased. No constraints, no moral oversight. Yet beneath the veneer of luxury, cracks formed. Sasha began pushing for more involvement in Mercer Global's dealings, attending investor dinners, making her presence felt at board meetings. She convinced Damien to funnel significant capital into her fledgling fashion line, Lennox Co. She boasted to close friends, including Clara Morales, that she was about to become the next Queen of Couture, with the backing of one of the world's most influential conglomerates. Alexander Miller noticed red flags almost immediately. Sasha's financial demands were disproportionate, her forecasts overly optimistic. Confronting Damien in the executive suite, Alexander laid out the grim assessment. "Damien, you're pouring millions into a company that has no credible track record. I ran a background check on Sasha's previous ventures. None turned a profit. We're not just risking your personal money. We're exposing Mercer Global to reputational damage." Damien's brow furrowed, anger sparking in his eyes. "Stay out of my personal affairs, Alex. If I want to invest in Sasha's business, that's my prerogative." "But it's not just your money," Alexander insisted. "You're leveraging company funds. Investors are starting to ask questions. We have responsibilities, to the board, to employees, to shareholders." "I'll handle the board," Damien snapped. "This conversation is over." Frustrated and hurt by his friend's transformation, Alexander could only watch as Damien accelerated down a collision course. Meanwhile, employees whispered about the shift in the corporate culture. Once known for its disciplined, strategic approach, Mercer Global now seemed enthralled by a volatile mistress with questionable motives. While Damien immersed himself in Sasha's dreams, Evelyn faced her own struggles. She retreated from public life, focusing solely on her pregnancy and philanthropic work. In an effort to maintain her dignity and protect the child, she refrained from launching any legal battles, but she kept track of the developments, heartbroken by how easily Damien was manipulated. Signs of trouble multiplied. Sasha burned through money at an alarming rate, hosting lavish fashion shows in upscale venues, hiring expensive marketing teams, and splurging on exotic getaways with Damien. She explained these were all investments in the brand's image, yet the returns never materialized. Like a house of cards, stacked precariously high, Damien's new life tottered on a razor's edge. Shadows loomed, both financial and emotional, and fate waited to deliver the chilling consequences of his betrayal. In the 7th month of her pregnancy, Evelyn found herself admitted to the hospital with complications, stress-induced hypertension, and early signs of preeclampsia. The heartbreak and mental strain had taken a toll on her health, placing both mother and child in danger. Dr. Charlotte Green prescribed bed rest and careful monitoring. Despite everything, Evelyn still held a semblance of hope that Damien would care enough to check on her, to acknowledge his soon-to-arrive child. She reached out to him through a single text. "I'm in the hospital. Please come." But Sasha, ever vigilant, had become adept at intercepting Damien's phone whenever messages from Evelyn appeared. Unbeknownst to him, she deleted the text, rationalizing it was better for Damien's peace of mind. Sasha believed if Evelyn or the child had a true emergency, the hospital would contact him directly. She convinced herself it was merely a small protective measure to maintain their relationship. Days passed, and Evelyn's condition worsened. Green advised that if her blood pressure didn't stabilize, they might have to induce an early delivery, placing the baby at risk. Evelyn's only support came from her longtime friend, Janet Whitmore, who was appalled that Damien had not arrived. Confused but still protective of her patient, Dr. Green tried calling Damien's office. Sasha intercepted that call too, telling the concerned doctor that Damien was away on a critical business trip. Meanwhile, Damien was in Las Vegas, attending an extravagant fashion show for Lenox Co. Sasha had decided the brand needed a spectacular launch party, one that would eclipse all competition. Dressed in a glittering gold gown, Sasha reveled in the limelight, draping herself on Damien's arm as photographers snapped away. Liquor flowed, music boomed, and the night felt like a fever dream of success and indulgence, until Alexander Miller's urgent call pierced through the glitz. Braving potential retaliation, Alexander had reached out to Dr. Charlotte Green independently. She had revealed Evelyn's dire situation, how she had tried to contact Damien for days. Horrified, Alexander tracked Damien down at the event, pulling him aside to deliver the news. "Damien, Evelyn's in the hospital," Alexander said, voice laced with alarm. "She's in critical condition. She's been trying to reach you. You need to go, now." Damien's face went pale. Through the swirling haze of guilt and panic, he finally grasped the severity of his negligence. He spun around to confront Sasha, who only offered a wide-eyed expression of innocent confusion. I didn't know," she stammered, though the flicker in her eyes told a different story. Without another word, Damien abandoned the fashion show, jumped on his private jet, and flew back to New York. By the time he arrived at the hospital, Evelyn had just been rushed into an emergency C-section. Damien waited outside the operating room, terror gripping his heart like a vice. He cursed his own irresponsibility, the layers of deceit, the seduction that had cost him precious time that might now determine the life or death of his wife and unborn child. Minutes felt like hours until Dr. Green emerged, her face etched with fatigue. Damien's entire body tensed, bracing for news that might break him forever. Dr. Green's eyes glistened with sorrow as she approached Damien. Quietly, she delivered the devastating news. "We managed to save the baby boy, but Evelyn suffered severe complications. Her heart failed under the strain. We tried everything, but she's gone, Mr. Mercer." It was as if every particle of air had been sucked out of the hallway. Damien staggered backward, his mind refusing to process the words. Gone? Evelyn, who had once been his anchor, his moral compass, the woman who believed in love above all else, was now lifeless, and he had not been there in her final moments. He had abandoned her for the hollow thrill of a mistress and a glitzy lifestyle. Overwhelmed by shock, guilt, and profound sadness, Damien collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Muffled sobs tore through him, something he had never allowed himself to do since his father's funeral. Nurses and orderlies passed by, respectfully keeping their distance, offering him space to grieve. In the neonatal unit, Evelyn's premature baby clung to life in an incubator. Dr. Green led Damien to see his son, tiny, fragile, yet miraculously fighting for each breath. The newborn's eyes remained shut, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded, unaware he no longer had a mother. Damien wept at the sight, feeling an onslaught of emotions, paternal instinct, overpowering remorse, and a sense of responsibility he had forsaken too late. He recalled Evelyn's final words, "You will regret this. One day you'll realize what you've done." The prophecy had come true in the cruelest way imaginable. When Sasha attempted to visit the hospital that evening, Damien refused to see her. Alexander Miller confronted her in the lobby. "He doesn't want to see you." "Go home," Alexander stated, barely containing his contempt. Sasha left in tears, realizing that her once invincible hold on Damien had shattered. A few days later, Evelyn's funeral was held in a modest ceremony, attended by family, close friends, and many individuals who had benefited from her philanthropic work. The quiet sobs of the bereaved rippled through the small church, the stained glass windows casting muted colors across grieving faces. Damien stood at the front, pale and gaunt, his shoulders weighed down by the enormity of his loss. He delivered a eulogy, his voice cracking, tears trailing down his cheeks. "Evelyn was the best of us. She cared more about others than herself. She taught me the meaning of genuine compassion, and I threw it all away." His tears gave way to heart-wrenching sobs, the congregation too stunned to do anything but share in his grief. In the days that followed, Damien took a leave of absence from Mercer Global. He moved back into the penthouse, but the space felt empty and haunted by memories of Evelyn. He would spend hours in the nursery, gazing at his newborn son, hooked to monitors and tubes, vowing silently that he would do whatever it took to protect the life he had brought into this world. Yet the reality remained. No amount of wealth could purchase a second chance with the woman he had betrayed. Sasha's calls and messages went unanswered. For once, the illusions of pleasure and power held no allure. Damien had discovered far too late that the true cost of his betrayal was beyond anything he could have imagined. Damien named his son Robert, in honor of Evelyn's father. The baby spent weeks in the neonatal ICU, battling the complications of premature birth, while doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition. Throughout that period, Damien sat vigil, every beep of the monitors a reminder of how precarious life could be. For Alexander Miller, watching Damien unravel was a complex experience. On one hand, he felt deep sympathy. Damien had lost the wife who was the guiding light of his life. On the other, Alexander couldn't forget that Damien had chosen his own path, enticed by Sasha Lennox's cunning. This was a tragedy years in the making, a tragedy that might have been avoided with a single different choice. Janet Whitmore, Evelyn's friend and longtime confidant of the Mercer family, stepped in to help with baby Robert's care. She shuttled between the penthouse and hospital, sometimes bringing homemade meals or reading stories in a soothing voice near the baby's incubator. She became a surrogate aunt of sorts, providing the gentle presence Evelyn would have wanted for her child. When baby Robert finally came home, hooked to a portable oxygen supply, Janet ensured the nursery was prepped with everything he needed. Still, the absence of Evelyn's maternal warmth was palpable. Meanwhile, the board of Mercer Global demanded Damien's immediate attention. The company's stocks had taken a hit following the scandalous rumors of Damien's affair and Evelyn's sudden death. Investors were wary about the direction of the conglomerate under a CEO mired in personal turmoil. Alexander stepped in to stabilize the situation, placating major shareholders with promises of renewed focus and ethical leadership. In a difficult yet necessary move, Alexander convened an emergency board meeting where he presented a comprehensive strategy to mitigate the financial damage. He also revealed the precarious nature of Mercer Global's investment in Lennox Co. The brand had hemorrhaged funds, and forensic accountants uncovered that Sasha had funneled large sums into untraceable offshore accounts. Sasha had manipulated invoices and expense reports, pocketing a fortune at the company's expense. The board demanded Damien take swift action. Humiliated and furious, Damien authorized an internal investigation and immediate cessation of funds to Lennox Co. All brand partnerships were frozen, and a legal team moved to press charges if Sasha did not return the misappropriated money. It was a shocking twist to those who had seen Sasha merely as a companion to the CEO. Now it was evident she was an opportunist who had left destruction in her wake. Sasha, sensing the walls closing in, attempted one final gambit. She reached out to tabloids, providing partial truths and dramatic fabrications about her relationship with Damien. She spun herself as the victim of a powerful billionaire's game, claiming he had promised her the world only to discard her once she was no longer convenient. However, her stories lacked consistency, and an investigation by a major publication unearthed evidence of her suspicious financial dealings. Public sympathy shifted away from Sasha, painting her as a gold digger who had knowingly wrecked a marriage. Although Damien had no sympathy left for Sasha, he felt a pang of responsibility for letting her into his life. When he discovered the depth of her deceit, the fictitious credentials, the spurious business dealings, he was both enraged and guilt-ridden. In a last, desperate phone call, Sasha pleaded for leniency. "Damien, please, I did it for us, for our future. Don't let them ruin me. We can work this out." He listened quietly before responding. "I ruined my own future the day I chose you over Evelyn, and I won't let you defile her memory by twisting the truth to save yourself." He hung up, feeling hollow. That night he looked around his opulent penthouse, its modern art pieces, marble floors, and glittering skyline views, and wondered how he had let wealth blind him to what truly mattered. If only he had recognized the emptiness lurking beneath the surface. Perhaps Evelyn would still be alive. Days dragged on, turning into weeks, then months. Damien handed over more responsibilities to Alexander, restricting his role in Mercer Global to major strategic decisions. He focused instead on raising Robert, who gradually grew stronger each day. Though the baby's early health scares remained a concern, Robert thrived under consistent medical care and the love of those around him. As Robert reached 6 months, the once fragile infant became a bright-eyed child, full of curious gurgles. Damien noticed something in Robert's gentle gaze, a spark reminiscent of Evelyn's compassionate spirit. He began to keep a journal, writing letters addressed to Robert for the day when he would be old enough to understand. In the pages, Damien recounted how he met Evelyn, the joy she brought into his life, and the monumental mistake he made. He wrote about responsibility, about the moral duty one has to family and integrity. He confessed his failings not just as a husband, but as a human being. This introspective process brought him to tears countless times, but also served as a path to redemption, however incomplete. Alexander and Janet witnessed Damien's transformation. He became softer, more introspective. Gone was the arrogance that once defined him. He humbled himself in front of Mercer Global's board, apologizing for the chaos he had wrought. He set up a trust fund in Evelyn's name to support philanthropic projects she had been passionate about, focusing especially on women's health and refugee assistance. The board, though initially skeptical, saw the sincerity in his actions and slowly began to regain confidence in his leadership. Stock prices, too, started to recover as public sentiment shifted. Yet no financial rebound or philanthropic effort could erase the tragedy. Evelyn's absence lingered like a phantom at every corner of Damien's life. In quiet moments he remembered her laugh, the way she would ruffle his hair when he was stressed, the softness of her gaze as she envisioned a future for their family. He kept a framed photo of her on his desk, one taken on their honeymoon in Fiji, where she stood barefoot on the beach, wearing a simple white sundress, her eyes sparkling with joy. Sometimes he would talk to that photo late at night, whispering apologies to a love that could no longer hear him. Months of legal battles ensued with Sasha. Finally, Mercer Global's lawyers cornered her, compelling her to return much of the embezzled funds. Facing criminal charges, Sasha negotiated a plea deal to avoid a high-profile trial. She vanished from the social scene, rumored to be hiding in Europe under a new identity. Damien, for his part, wanted no further involvement. He refused to let her name cross his lips, for that chapter of his life was over. In the quiet hush of one late autumn evening, a year after Evelyn's passing, Damien found himself standing by her graveside in Greenfield, Massachusetts. He held Robert, now a wide-eyed 1-year-old, close to his chest. Cool wind rustled the leaves around the modest headstone that bore Evelyn's name. Damien knelt down, carefully placing a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite, by the grave. "Evelyn," he murmured, voice choked with emotion, "I'm so sorry. Thank you for giving me our beautiful son. I promise I'll do better. I'll become a man you'd be proud of, and I'll raise him to know who his mother was. Your kindness, your strength, it lives in him." Baby Robert cooed softly, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. In that stillness, Damien felt both the weight of guilt and the spark of hope. Life would never be the same without Evelyn, but perhaps this was a sign, a chance to atone, to reshape the Mercer name into something that reflected Evelyn's virtues. Returning to New York, Damien embarked on a new chapter as a father first, a businessman second. Each morning he spent quiet moments feeding Robert, grateful for the giggles and messy spills. He took paternal leave, delegating daily operations to Alexander. He joined parenting groups, read baby care manuals, and even tried his hand at homemade purees. Neighbors and staff at the penthouse watched in awe as the once impeccably groomed CEO wrestled with baby food stains and diaper emergencies, unashamed to admit he was a novice at fatherhood. In the corporate arena, rumors circulated that Damien had changed. Board members who once questioned his moral compass found a man renewed by purpose. He refocused Mercer Global on sustainable investments, championing ethical practices and doubling the philanthropic budget. Alexander Miller privately admitted that this was the best version of Damien he had ever seen. A man touched by humility and guided by love for his son. Still, nightmares haunted him. In those restless visions, he relived the night he chose Sasha over Evelyn, the frantic hospital corridor, Dr. Green's sympathetic but devastating expression, and the finality of that coffin lowering into the ground. He would wake up drenched in sweat, guilt crashing over him like a tidal wave. But each morning, Robert's innocent smile reminded him that he still had something to live for, an obligation to at least try to be worthy of Evelyn's sacrifice. Several years later, on a spring afternoon when Robert was old enough to babble words, father and son visited the newly launched Evelyn Mercer Maternity Center, a facility built to support underprivileged women and reduce complications during childbirth. Standing before the building's dedication plaque, Damien lifted Robert onto his hip, gently tracing his finger across the etched words. Dedicated to the memory of Evelyn Carson Mercer, whose compassion changed countless lives. May her spirit guide us to protect and nurture those who need it most. Tears welled in Damien's eyes. He pressed a soft kiss against Robert's forehead. "Your mum would have loved this place," he whispered. In his heart, he felt Evelyn's approval, a gentle warmth that tempered the ever-present ache. In time, people in high society circles softened their judgment. They saw that Damien carried the weight of his remorse every day, transforming it into action that helped thousands of struggling families. Invitations to galas resumed, and so did philanthropic partnerships. But whenever he stepped onto a red carpet or into a luxurious boardroom, a part of him remained humbled, never forgetting that his wealth and status had once driven him to ruin. Evelyn's legacy flourished in the charitable programs, in the medical missions abroad, and most importantly, in Robert, who possessed her kind eyes and her gentle disposition. And though Damien continued to enjoy financial success, no amount of profit or prestige could fully cleanse him of the regret that had become his lifelong companion. In the end, the tragedy of Evelyn's death and the near loss of their child became the crucible that changed Damien Mercer forever. He would forever carry the scar of his betrayal, a permanent reminder that love, once shattered by selfishness, can never be fully mended. Yet he found a semblance of redemption in fatherhood and altruism, dedicating his life to a cause Evelyn had championed with all her heart. Though the world remembered him as a billionaire who stumbled into scandal, Damien found his true identity in the eyes of a little boy who looked up at him each day, expecting nothing more than unconditional love. For Damien, that love was the sole measure of his worth, and the only hope he had to honor the memory of the woman he had once forsaken. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. Billionaire chose his mistress over his pregnant wife. The tragic consequence he will never forget is a powerful reminder that in the ruthless pursuit of desire, we risk losing what's most precious to us. Damien's story shows that no empire is worth building if it stands on the shattered remains of a heart once filled with devotion. If this story moved you, please consider hitting that like button and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Help us reach more people by sharing this video with friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gripping, heartfelt tales. Your support makes our storytelling possible, and we can't wait to bring you more narratives that resonate with life's deepest lessons. Thank you, and see you in the next story.